Oh, that's that. Uh, and we're looking forward to having this conversation. These are unprecedented times, and the only thing we really know is that change is constant. And I've been leery to come out and say too many things in the beginning because you didn't want to say don't wear a mask when the next day they said wear a mask or whatever. So I think we have enough information now that we can go ahead and make some generalities. But first of all, I just want to thank you for being here today and our clients for being a part of the Boulevard family and the amazing staff that we have at Boulevard Realty and the agents that are very committed to you and your properties and your home and your communities. Safety and personal safety is the primary objective for our staff and for our agents and for you. And everyone in this unprecedented time needs to do what they are the most comfortable with. There's a lot of white noise out there and there's a lot of uncertainty. And we weren't even sure that real estate was going to be an essential service. And we're certainly glad that it is. But it needs to be treated as such, as essential. For those that need to sell a house, we're here to help you sell your house. For those that need to buy a home, we're here to help you buy a home in the safest manner that's possible. For those that it's not essential, we recommend that you stay home. For agents' safety, for your safety, for the safety of your family and friends and coworkers, this isn't a time to take things lightly. And we understand that and have from the very beginning tried to be as cautious as we can while continuing to do the business that we have. My basic assumption from the beginning is that all of us are somewhat of a carrier of COVID-19. I think you have to be realistic. Statistically, we have tested an insignificant number of people within our city and our region. I look at the numbers today, roughly 5,000 people have been tested out of what a city that has almost 4 million people in the city limits at any given moment. That's 0.00125. The way I look at it is if we were at a Texan game with 80,000 people, you would have tested 100 football players and not one other person in the stands. It's, I think realistic to assume that plenty of people in that stadium would probably have the virus. And so we treat each and every one of us that we probably do have the virus and we're susceptible not only to infecting others, but being infected at any particular time. That's why social distancing is the most important thing, that we maintain the public safety and the utmost safety and health of everyone that we possibly can. So we're going to talk about the market today. We're going to talk about the perspective of a seller and of a buyer, and we're going to take on a couple of different parameters. The immediate short term being April and May. The immediate period following that being June, July, and August. And really, what does real estate look like in the third quarter, fourth quarter of 2020 and 2021? We started weeks ago daily Zoom meetings for our agents. So we meet at 10 o'clock every morning on a Zoom meeting, and I try and provide the latest updates to our agents, and they're your best resource. Please reach out to your agent or any one of us at any particular moment, and we're happy to provide you the latest information that we have. And we're going to continue to have these Tuesday meetings for the foreseeable few months so that you could log in and get the information and ask the questions that you might want to specifically have. Our industry has weathered a number of storms. I've been at this about 23 years now. I had a closing on 9/11 that did not happen, of course, on that day because the federal wires shut down, but having to live with the trauma of the immediacy after 9/11 and what would happen to the country as a whole, who was jolted, who had this idea that we were safe from wars and our generation wasn't going to experience what previous generations had been through. And then for those of you that were in business and whose livelihood was dependent upon the economy that was impacted by that, I think you'll remember that that was a truly traumatic period of time in our country's history. this is a similar time. It is a defining moment for this generation of people. My daughter, who's 26, 27, 28, who doesn't really remember the impact or the emotional strain of a 9/11. And of course, I remember the financial downturn that came after 2008. And probably for me, that was the most important relevance, because our industry had been on a pretty good ride for a long period of time, and people were borrowing 107%. They were borrowing against stock portfolios that weren't worth what they were really borrowing against. And it was a pretty long and hard fall for us to get jolted back into reality over here. I had numerous houses that people borrowed 107% on, and participated in mortgage fraud, never picked up the keys, and it was a bad deal. It impacted all of the rest of us. And the national economy was so much worse than Texas, but we were impacted. I remember a decade ago talking about the national headlines and how they impact the psyche of the particular buyer in the marketplace. And we'll talk a little bit about interest rates and how the headlines give people an impression. You know, when you go to Fed rate of 0, it doesn't mean necessarily that mortgage rates are 0, and you have to temper what is the headline into the reality. And part of what we do is educate people and be a guiding force there. And so I think back of the hurricane also, and the tremendous number of people that were impacted in our region and are still impacted today. And for every yin, there was a yang. For everyone, immediately what happened after the hurricane was we rented a fair number of houses that had been struggling beforehand. And so the rental market overcame. Areas like the Heights, which were known for being high and dry, probably benefited from certain areas that had been impacted by the hurricane. So real estate is very much like that. It's very localized in what it's going to impact along the way. And so I think that's what we have to think about as we go from this point forward. The Houston Association of Realtors are going to release their statistics for March here, probably later today. And the reality of those statistics, which aren't really indicative of what's happening today, are going to be too positive. They're going to sound too good. You must remember that in 2019, we were going over what was the single best year in the history of real estate in the region. And we were continuing down that path in January and February. And March, even though we entered into a shutdown March 15th, the numbers are going to be up. We sold more houses in March of 2020 than we ever have in any other March. We were up 8%. The dollar volume was up 12%. The average price was up 4%. The median price was up 4%. But of course, we know we've all been impacted. I pray that they come out with a very subdued message, and I believe that they will. These numbers are not reflective of what's going on in the marketplace today. And it is not that good. It's not as good as the numbers reflected. The numbers from the statistics are often 30 days behind. And I'm a realist that the market today is completely different than it was on March 10th. There is no comparison between where we are at today and where we were at 30 days ago. So we've looked at the statistics and broken them down a little more importantly into the micro regions that we look at. And the realistic deal is the number of new listings, the number of listings for sale compared to 1 month ago or 1 year ago is down fairly well. And that's the best news for real estate. Our industry is based on supply and demand, just like everything else in the world. If there are 1,000 houses for sale in the Heights and there's only 100 buyers in the Heights, then the value of those houses will come down in order to meet the supply and the demand. So one of the things we must continue to look at is that amount of supply. And because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and many people do not want to show your house, you would envision that the number of listings probably would go down at this particular time. And provided we are selling houses, we are selling houses at Boulevard Realty, and we are selling houses across the city and the county, and Fort Bend County and Montgomery County. But of course, we're showing less houses than ever before because we have more caution and care. The numbers are down pretty significant, about 50%, as you might expect. Most people wouldn't today just make an appointment to go look at a house. They would probably call the agent and talk it through. This home is occupied. It has 2 small children. We try not to show unless you're extremely serious. I had a listing the other day, and they love everything about it except they didn't like the location. I believe it's irresponsible to go and show a house and then tell me you didn't like the location when, damn it, you knew the location before you went into the house, opened the doorknob, went in, and potentially impacted my family and their 2 small children. Don't do it. That's not essential. If you know the location and you don't like the location, don't go look at the house. We need to be realistic about what essential showings are. And so for me, and even my sellers, I've had pretty good conversations. I'm not going to show a house to people just to show the house. I'm going to vet them damn close to make sure that they don't have any symptoms, that they haven't traveled, that they understand the risk that they're putting myself in and others in. Most of us, we've implemented pretty stringent policies with regards to showing homes, the use of hand sanitizer, using a antibacterial wipe in your hand when you open the doorknob, close the doorknob, wiping the doorknobs down, maintaining not 6 feet. There's no reason to be 6 feet close to someone when you're showing a house. Be 20 feet away from them, or don't even go inside. If you're accompanying the listing, wait outside when the individuals or the couple show the house, walk through it, come back out, stay 20 feet away, answer their questions about the neighborhood or the timing or anything that you need. But do, everyone, be responsible. And that's why I think the number of showings is down. It doesn't mean that the interest is less. Of course, it's cautionary more than anything. The showings are going to stay down. And of course, just the sheer number of closings are off the last couple of weeks because people are impacted by the economy. The number one thing I think we need to be concerned about in Houston, Texas is oil. The coronavirus will pass. The stock market, most of us considered to be overvalued and due for some correction, and has been discussed for years there. The true impact to our area is the impact of oil production, and those sort of things. So, that's really the area that we need to be most concerned about in the long term. And so the state of the market is that we've shifted. We've shifted from a month ago where it basically was a seller's market, and I would have listed a house and there would have been 10 people interested and we would have had a bidding war and I could have chosen from 10 offers. I'm not going to be in that scenario. Every seller needs to understand it's a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market anymore. You can try and sell for anything that you want to sell for, but the reality of it is the buyers are going to be the driving force in our industry for the rest of 2020 and much of 2021. And so sellers are going to have to be realistic about those sort of things. And they're going to have to be more agreeable and more negotiable than they would have otherwise. I think that's the sheer nature of it. In the markets that we predominantly sell in, we haven't noticed in any of these instances, Harvey, Ike, Enron falling, that there's massive price reductions. In the last 30 days, in the Heights, Montrose, West U, Memorial, the average original list price to the sales price in the Heights was 99%. In the other areas, it was a little softer, about 98 to 97% from the list price to what you actually taken. Of course, over time, that number is going to get larger. I'm in the process of trying to sell my darling daughter a house or whatever, and they look at these $500,000 houses and they think they're going to get them for $450,000. And the reality of it is they're not going to get them for $450,000 immediately. People will not jump down that low. They will lower the price by $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 and see if it captures someone else's attention before they take such a dramatic decrease in the price. I just don't think that's realistic. But I think if we're in a $1.5 million house that's been on the market for a period of time, it's not realistic to think you're going to get $1.5 million. The reality of it is someone's probably going to offer $200,000 less, and you're going to try and meet in the middle at $50,000 or $100,000 less, or it's probably not going to sell in the short term. It probably just isn't. I think the buyers today are all wondering, am I buying at a high? If I wait 2 months or 4 months, is this going to be cheaper? And some of them are going to be cheaper. I mean, no one should say otherwise. This is what I look at, is if this one goes away, how long is it going to take you to get the next one? And is it going to be just as nice or better? And if the answer to that question is, it may take too long, then I wouldn't go down that path. I'm trying to sell a lot to someone who's been looking for over a year for an oversized lot with a walkable location, not in a historic district, to build a custom home. And when one comes on the market, yeah, it's a high price. And yes, they've taken a beating in the stock market. But if this one goes away, are we willing to wait 2 or 3 years for a comparable location to come on the market? Because there's just not that many of them. So you've got to be realistic about the true supply and the demand and what you're going to be able to receive along the way. So, and the suburbs are going to take more of a beating of that because there's more of that particular supply than there is in the inner city. So, and we can talk about both of those differences. But definitely the advantage to a seller today is that you have less competition than you would have had if we had not had the coronavirus, the declining of the stock market, and the declining of oil prices. So with fewer listings on the marketplace, your home has a chance of getting more attention than it would have otherwise. People sitting at home have more time to look at HAR.com, they have more time to look at virtual homes, they have more time to call the agent and ask questions, and to do due diligence. And so they still may be hesitant of the time, but I think that there is some value in homes that have a unique characteristic. If I'm selling a modern house in the Heights and there's not that many modern houses in the Heights, I have advised them to keep that house on the marketplace, because I think there's going to be a buyer who finds that modern house in the Heights very desirable and doesn't have that many options of some place to go to find something similar. So, I mean, that's just one of the scenarios. But every seller has an option today. They can leave it on and see what happens for a bit. They can take it off. We can take off the houses and only sell them off MLS to give them a little break. And some houses, if they've been on for an extended period of time, it might be time to give them a break. Just take them off and put them back on at another particular point in time. I think we've got to be realistic that this too shall pass. I do not think in any way that it's going to pass soon. I don't believe it's over in 2 weeks. I don't believe it's over in 4 weeks. I don't believe it's over in 6 weeks. I think we're not going to see normal real estate activity for quite a while. But we're going to see real estate activity. There's always someone that wants to buy and someone to sell. It's beyond imagination to think of the amount of money that's pumping in to try and address the situation. You got to remember the 2020 US budget, they were anticipating $3.8 trillion in revenue and spending $4.8 trillion for everything in the United States of America. They've allocated already $6 trillion to address this scenario, more than we would, 1.5 times more than we would have spent in the country for the entire year is going to be thrown at this scenario over the next couple of months. And that's just the beginning. There's no scenario, I don't think, that they won't throw trillions of more dollars. In the Great Recession, in the Obama administration, the stimulus was $900 billion spread out over an extended period of time. It's unprecedented, the amount of relief. And many people are going to be hurt. Many small businesses, many large businesses are going to be impacted by this scenario. But there is an end in sight, and there is an opportunity for people to recover in a relatively brief amount of time, considering the great impact that we're going through. So we will be focused at Boulevard Realty, what's going on with oil, what's going on with those jobs. We started the year, very optimistic that we were going to add these 60,000 jobs in Houston. And I don't believe anyone today thinks we're going to add 60,000 jobs. I believe that we're going to have a net loss of jobs to some degree. In that scenario, though, what really matters is, do you think more people are going to be living in Houston, Texas in 6 months or 1 year, or less people? Do you think people will be loading up in their U-Hauls and heading out of the city, which is what happened in the oil days of the 1980s? You truly lost population. Or will certain areas of Houston actually increase? And will people, instead of moving to San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York, choose to move to southern climates that are more affordable, where you have more land and less density and more opportunity than you would in other areas? I personally believe that we're not going to have a mass migration out of the city, that in reality, you're going to have people who find it more desirable to live. And in many ways, I think people are going to find that it's more desirable to live into the inner city. When I think of the quarantine situation, and these things on Facebook, you see these comments, do you see yourself being quarantined here? I think the quality of our home and how one feels about their home and what it does for you and where that home is in proximity to connectivity and community is more important than ever. I think that's what we're seeing. Being in the back of the woodlands somewhere where you're stuck in your home and you have to get in a car to go and do something, versus being in the 900 block of Euclid where you can walk over and still get your coffee at Antidote, and you can walk over and pick up your meal from Estranto's, and you can walk down Heights Boulevard, or you can hop on your bike to the hike and bike trail. I think that's what people find. I think that they're going to find the walkability and the connectivity of a certain community, and how you feel about yourself in your house is going to be more and more important than ever before. I look at the car companies who are advertising today. They're not saying a damn thing about a car, because they're not selling you a car at the moment. They're selling you peace of mind. They're selling you assurance. They're selling you deferred payments. They're selling you some stability. Kroger today is not selling a gallon of milk for $2.95. They're talking about their employees and how heroic they are, and the safety concerns that they're going through for your safety and the safety and health of their constituents and their consumers. That's what they're selling. And that's what we're going to have to go sell in real estate also. Not necessarily 3 bedrooms, 2 baths with 12-foot ceilings, but how does this house make me feel? Can I work at home here? Do I feel good here? Is it comforting? Is it nourishing? Is it a place I want to be in a world that's full of despair? And I think that's a very good thing to go and sell over there. What is the desirability of what's happening in our marketplace? Our industry is in constant flux, like every other industry. And so we've seen numerous changes. I think we're going to continue to see numerous changes. And it's extremely important that one has an agent that's well abreast of what's going on into the world. We've had a number of scenarios where someone was set to close and the lender in Georgia just stops lending money altogether. No fault of the buyer, no fault of the seller. I mean, there are certainly changes constantly going in every aspect of our industry. So interest rates are constantly on people's mind. Are they up, are they down? And when there's interest rates are geared towards supply and demand. When there was a great rush of the lowering of the rates and everyone was refinancing, and then of course they raised the rates to slow down the flow of people. They were overwhelmed with people refinancing, and so rates actually bumped up a little bit until they could get adjusted to the quantity of individuals and families that were refinancing. interest rates are at historic lows. And some people, like even my children we were talking about, if we get a house at 450 and 3% interest rate, and in a year from now it's 430, but the interest rate's 4%, what did they really save? What did they really make any more money by waiting a little bit for it to get a little bit cheaper? Maybe not. Maybe for them it was better to get situated over the summer before the school year starts again, and maybe that's in their best interest. And you have to think about those sort of things. These loans that are conforming under $510,000 of loan amounts in our region are still relatively safe and secure, and interest rates are good. There have definitely been issues with jumbo loans or loans that are non-conforming. They're unstable. And so it's constantly evolving how you can do a loan. It's not the same way it would have been a year ago or even 2 months ago, where you buy a $1.5 million house, you put 20% down, and there are plenty of lenders who'll loan you the 1.2 or $1.3 million. Those loans are harder to come by. They're next to impossible to come by, but you never want to say that, because there is someone who's probably willing to do it. It's all about risk aversion. When the government doesn't back those loans, then they're riskier. And so the interest rate is higher. The requirements are going to be higher. The credit score has to be higher. You have to have more assets. So pay attention to, even, if you were told 2 weeks ago you have loan approval for your $800,000 house with 10% down or even 20% down, that may not be true today. Keep abreast with what's going on with your personal lender. Make sure that you have good communication with your realtor so that we can follow up and find the best program for you. Appraisals, because we've been concerned about putting strangers into especially occupied houses, have reduced some of their rules so that you can have more drive-by appraisals, you can have more desktop appraisals, which means the appraiser's not necessarily coming in the house. While that can be good for health, as loans become riskier and as the economy becomes shakier, the requirements for appraisals will get more and more strict. They're happier to loan money when the economy is booming, and they're more concerned about loaning money when the economy is shrinking. So the requirements for appraisals, we've had more and more lenders require the sellers to sign more things and the real estate agents to sign more things. We used to do this in the Great Recession all the time. You're signing something that you're not participating in mortgage fraud, and there's no kickbacks, and you're going to see more people concerned about the risk of the loans there. But there's good news, but I think it will be followed by a more stringent appraisal position. We're not going to be able to push the boundaries like you did when there's a booming economy. Certainly, showing houses have changed altogether. More and more, vacant houses are a little easier. We're a little less concerned, although we're still trying to incorporate rules and regulations where when they show a house, please use a sanitizer, antibacterial wipe on the doorknobs. Please use hand sanitizer when you enter. Please use hand sanitizer when you leave. Please, distance yourself. Don't put your hands on countertops or bathroom countertops, or lean up against walls like we might have done when you didn't care about those sort of things. So you have to be more careful. Occupied houses, we're even taking greater precautions on. And we're trying to both eliminate needless showings. That's the most important thing. Where we can do virtual showings, where the agent can go and just Facebook Live or answer questions or do Zoom type meetings. This is the easiest way to have the first showing of occupied houses. Make sure that this is the type of house that you want. Don't have needless showings. If you need 5 bedrooms, don't go see a 4-bedroom house and then say, well, I really needed 5. You needed 5 before you put people at risk. You are putting people at risk anytime you're close to people. I mean, anytime you touch a doorknob or a bathroom door or anything of that nature, people are at somewhat risk. And so be responsible with those sort of things. On the closings, I mean, same thing. We all used to huddle up with closings. Now the closings, look, we don't need children at closings. We don't need parents at closings. We don't need the lender at closing. They don't want the realtor at closing. The realtor should have reviewed the information prior to the closing, and as few people as possible interact with one another using social distancing. We've tried our best to use the DocuSigns and the virtual notaries and the virtual closings. Much of that is dependent upon the lender. If the lender requires a wet signature, an actual signature on the document, then we're not going to be able to DocuSign or virtual sign or those sort of things. So good communication with the lender, a lender that's offering the most amount of flexibility. That's what you're going to have to keep involved with. So of course, we're all getting experience with Zoom and these sort of virtual meetings, and they're going to be more and more and more important along the way. The state of Texas and of course the Houston Association of Realtors, we've adopted this COVID-19 addendum for use in the middle of transactions or at the beginning of transactions. And it's a form, and I'm not a lawyer, and I just have a little bit of experience over here. I'm not, you know, in many instances, it's going to be fine. The sheer reality of it is, it favors buyers more than it favors sellers. And the reason I say that, in a normal scenario, if we were set to close June 1st and a hurricane forms in the Gulf on May 27th and nothing can close until June 10th, everyone got that. You just proceed on down the road, and if the house didn't have any damage and you can still get your insurance, and we would go and close on June 10th. In these scenarios, when something happens, it basically gives either party, which I think is going to create total chaos in just a bit, the right to terminate the contract after 30 days of a delay. So the buyer moves it 30 days and something happens with lending or the recording of the deeds or the title companies or the city or the county or the nation or something does something. And then all of a sudden we're to the 31st day and the seller can bump out the buyer. That's going to create chaos. The buyer can just has the unrestricted right to terminate. That's going to create a little chaos. So I think it can create chaos, but it gets us back to where we're really at in the marketplace. Buyers that want to buy a house should be able to buy a house. Sellers that want to sell a house should be able to sell a house. Both sides, buyers and sellers, need to allow for some flexibility. If you don't, before you sign and agree to a contract, plan for a delay. If you're the buyer, plan for a delay. If you're a seller, expect a delay. Through no fault of anyone's, the pressure that we had in years past when the buyer has no place to go and his furniture's in a truck and then the loan doesn't work and they're over here staying with grandma. I mean, it's too much stress. Plan on a delay. Plan on some situation coming out that causes some delay, and think it through. Both of you, the selling side and the buyer side, needs to think through what's going to happen if through no fault of either party there's a delay, and you must plan on the delay. I really believe that if you don't plan on the delay, and hopefully it wouldn't happen that way, but I would anticipate a few days delay. If you're in an apartment, for God's sake, please don't try and buy a house 2 days before the end of the lease where they've leased your apartment and you have to get out. Give yourself some flexibility. You know, if you're the seller and you need this one to buy that one, for God's sake, please don't count on them happening on the same day. Close on one, rent back a week, close on the other one in a week or two. I mean, it's too many variables, too many things happening. The day before closing, they could ask for another appraisal, and the appraiser can't get there for a week. The insurance companies may stop insuring on houses. The lender may stop loaning on houses. The title company may not close that week. The county may not allow recordings, which, I mean, any number of things can happen. Please plan on some form of delay. When they're vacant, it shouldn't be that big a deal, but seller, do not count on the money on the day that's on the contract. There's no way you're going to get the money on the day of the contract. So don't create undue stress. If you're a real estate agent, don't provide some sort of assurance that things are going to happen. You should say the exact opposite, that there are extreme variables going on in our industry at this particular time, and you should plan on a delay. And we're talking with the other side what would happen in the event of some delay as a result of either party. Maybe the bank shut down and you can't even get the seller's payoff from the lender who's all working on SBA loans. They don't have any employees working at the banks these days. Remember, I mean, any number of things can happen. And so you're going to have to plan for those scenarios. Sellers, be realistic. Buyers, if you want to buy a house, we want to sell you one. If you don't want to buy a house, don't get into the market. If you truly believe the value of houses are going to go down significantly, don't go buy a house. I don't personally believe that the majority of houses are going to go down significantly because I have no experience that's ever shown that to be true in any of the markets that we have predominantly worked at. There are some markets that are going to get significantly softer. There were already markets that were softer before we got to this scenario. If you have an older, outdated home, there's no buyer for your home. If you have an old, outdated 3-story townhouse and you're just one of 10,000 townhouses on the marketplace, and there are still new townhouses that will be way more negotiable because of the way the lending is going to work, you're in trouble. If you're a $2 million house that's dated 20 years old in memorial, you were soft before we got here. You're going to continue to remain soft. If you have a home in the energy corridor is nervous. You're going to have a harder time selling your home. If you have a house in the back of the Woodlands today, we're going to be a little nervous about ExxonMobil for just a bit here. There are micro markets that aren't going to be as well as others. Someone had emailed me about the downtown high-rise, high-end market. It was already soft, guys. We have too much supply of brand new high-rises that are 80% sold. The profits in the last 20%. They haven't had that many sales of them, and so they're going to be more negotiable today. I am closing on a unit at 2727 Kirby that's 8 years old. 8 years ago, they paid $1,350,000. My client today is paying $975,000 because you know what 2727 Kirby's competing with? 500 brand new condos that have more amenities and are shinier and prettier and newer than it is. It's called supply and demand. You've got to realize there are going to be some markets that are soft. That had nothing to do with oil, nothing to do with the stock market, nothing to do with COVID-19. That was just the scenario that situation was in. And so it's based on supply and demand. If we flood the market, but in the long run, what we're going to see is foreign investors from China, from Italy, from France. Instead of buying a place in New York City or San Francisco, they may very well buy a high-rise in Houston, Texas, because they may perceive our medical facilities to be better prepared, and it's cheaper, and the quality of life may be better than it would be in the middle of Brooklyn today. So there will be a buyer for those units. You're just going to have to, you can't get here from China or France or Italy today. You can't get here from New York today. You can't get here from New Orleans today. So, I mean, it's a timing issue also. I said from the very beginning, I put up March 15th, keep calm and don't panic. If you panic, it incites panic. And lowering the pricing of housing doesn't stimulate a buyer. It incites more panic more than it does incite people to actually act, to actually go and buy the house. So I think you've got to think about the different scenarios that you're in. What can you do to make your home that you want to sell more desirable? If you're buying one, what is it? What are the attributes that I know today that make it more desirable? it's walkability. There, 3-bedroom, 2-bath bungalows in the Heights are not going to go down in value. There's more than enough people who will want to live there. The number one scenario that I see happening is that people will not push like they did before. Instead of buying a $2 million house in River Oaks that really wasn't that nice, they'll come and buy a modern bungalow house for $1,350,000 in the Heights that is really very, very nice. Instead of buying a $1.3 million house, maybe someone else is going to buy a $995,000 house. Instead of buying a $1 million house, you may go buy the $750,000 house. Instead of buying the $750,000 house, you may go buy the $500,000 house in Oak Forest or Timber Grove. So I believe that those houses are going to sell just fine. I believe that in many of the markets, Area 16, Area 9, Area 17, you're going to be the beneficiary of some of these scenarios. And like I say, each little, what is the most unique about it? Ginger and Richard are looking for, Ginger and Ryan are looking for a 2-story townhouse, not using a shared drive with some type of yard. In my opinion, based on my 25 years experience, there are fewer and fewer of those every day. So yes, I think the value of those are not going to come down significantly during this particular time, nor do I think that they're going to decline in value compared to a 3-story shared drive with absolutely no yard whatsoever. Yeah, I think that market's going to be a little softer depending on the age of the unit, how nice is it, and where is it? The more walkable it is. If you don't have a yard, you need to be walkable to something. The more walkable of those units, the more that they're going to be desirable. The less walkable of them, I think they're going to have a difficulty when there's ample supply of that. So truly, it's about inventory. Rhonda in our office has broken it down. Brandon, we've looked at Heights less than 500, Heights greater than 500, Montrose between 500 and $1 million, West U between $1 million and 1.5. Almost every scenario, every one of these scenarios, the amount of inventory is less today than it was a year ago. The list price to the sales price is somewhere between 99 to 97%. Probably will get a little bit softer, but the market is still fine where it was fine a month ago. Where it was soft a month ago, it's softer, no doubt about it. And it's just going to be one of those features about it. Many people, and I think we'll continue to see it, and I have a fair number of people, are nervous as hell about the stock market, and they'll go put their money in residential real estate. An investment and the safety of that real estate is probably safer than it is at United stock or Amazon stock. Amazon stock can go down. When this is over, Amazon stock may go to hell because people may get tired of Amazon and only want to shop local and shop small. I don't know about the value of Amazon. I do know they're not making any more residential real estate inside the 610 loop or the Beltway, and it has historically been a very good scenario. I think what will happen in many of these houses that had difficulty selling, I had a fair number of them in 2013, 14, and 15, you're going to get the chance to go lease your house. And we're seeing it already. Having to move to Dallas, I can't sell my house. I'm going to lease my house in Houston. I'm going to go lease my house in Dallas. So there's going to be more people who want to lease versus they will not have the ability to put down 20 or 30%. They won't have the ability to put up $700,000. So you're going to see people lease, see what happens in the general economy for a year. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For all of you that are worried and that you go to lease, remember there's some investor that's going to go buy a house thinking that you're out there willing to go lease the house. And so I think the leasing market will be very strong over the next year. I think I have seen this in every scenario. I am begging every builder that I know to go build a house. because you will see the number of new constructions plummet. You will see the number of permits plummet. You will see banks get very nervous about lending to new construction, and we will absorb all of these houses over the next year. And the builder investor that is invested in a nice home in a nice location will be sitting pretty, because he will have no, or she will have no competition. It's a, don't go push the limit. If the Heights is selling a lot of $1.35 million houses, don't go build $1.8 million houses. Go build $1,295,000 houses, and you had less competition to buy the lot than you did 2 months ago. So it's a perfect time to buy a lot in Oak Forest and go build a house for $1.1 million. It's the perfect time to go build one and buy one in Garden Oaks and sell it for $1.2 million. It's a perfectly good time to buy a lot and build a house zoned to Travis Elementary that's walkable to things now down Studemont. So, I mean, there are opportunities for people to go and invest into this market, whether it's new construction, whether that's remodeling, whether that's the rental or true investment marketplace. I think there's ample opportunity there. Do be concerned about scams. We're seeing them happen all the time. These email scams, the wire fraud scams. I mean, you need to be very, very, very concerned. There's too many people out there who are participating in scams. They will take advantage of people. They will try and buy your house and do weird things and get your bank account, and before you know it, they've siphoned off or charged credit cards in your name. So be leery of scams. I have been subject to a number of them. They hacked me and sent text to my agents saying that I needed money. I got one yesterday, text me your information to get your grant within 10 minutes, but you need your bank account information so we can wire your grant. Well, no, that was not accurate. It wasn't true. It was a scam. It was fraud. So be leery of those sort of things. You're going to see more and more of that. As you see trillions of dollars flow through the economy, you're going to see plenty of opportunistic people that want to scam individuals. So let's be careful there. A number of people have asked about reassessment of property taxes. It's very frustrating when you get your tax valuation and you bought a house for $1 million last year, and now they've assessed your value at $1.1 million. It basically is a snapshot of January 1, 2020, and the reality of it is, most of you that bought a house, it did go up 10%. Be grateful that it did. Will it go down in 2020 and they reassess after January 1, 2021? Most likely so. You'd have to apply enough pressure. There doesn't appear to be enough pressure at the legislature or the governor's office to require some reassessment at the moment. So I don't today see any reassessment of your property values, nor a great ability. When you go to the hearing, you can't use any data that's after January 1 of 2020. You hear what I'm saying? You can't take any data that wasn't from January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2020. By law, they're not allowed to use data after January 1 because your assessed value is January 1. So it doesn't matter what happens March 15th or April 15th or June 15th, whether that's a hurricane or a failing business or a failing economy or a failing stock market. So you can certainly try, but most markets that we sold in, the markets did go up a fair amount. And so I'm not a big fan of that either. My lot that I paid a lot of money for went up in value, and I'm not able to do too much about it for 2020's valuation, but I'll certainly be there in 2021 fighting like the rest of you. Any other sort of questions that we have? I'm new to this sort of deal, so I'm not sure if I can read questions that pop up. I tried to answer the ones that were sent to me earlier. Aaron, if I'm supposed to be doing something else about looking for questions, let me know. We are going to.
You ready?
Go ahead.
So someone asked, any effect on mid-rise, high-rise apartment condo residents wanting to flee high-density areas or high-density living because of the virus?
My impression is that you're going to see that. We have not seen that yet because many of those people have not been able to leave those areas, whether they're in San Francisco or New York. I think what you're going to see is twofold. I think if given a choice, people are seeing that in the short run, the high density places like New York and San Francisco, where there was a mid-rise or a high-rise, have been higher risk than single-family homes. And so the tendency today would be to go find some single-family home where you had a yard to walk the dog that was safer, where you could sit out in the sunshine in your own yard versus your patio or something. But I do believe you're going to see a fair amount of investors who flee from those other areas that will come and absorb some of those units. We have a saturation of those units. So today I looked at the high-rise condo market over $1 million. In the month of March, we sold 0. There's 51 on the MLS. There are at least 500 not on the MLS. So what does that tell you about the absorption rate? If you sold 2 next month and 4 the next month and 8 the next month, you still have a hell of a lot of supply. Many of those buildings that we're seeing, Arabella, that type of thing, they've paid their loans by selling 90% of those units. So this is truly the profit of those units. So there are 8 or 9 units in Arabella today. I've shown every one of them. And there's not one unit today. They won't give me a $50,000 bonus and a $50,000 reduction in the price, because that's their money. Remember, they're not even going to pay that to the bank. So instead of taking $1 million, they'll take $900,000 because they're motivated to get their $900,000 and move on to the next project. That hurts all these other properties over here that don't have the same ability. So short term, that's definitely a buyer's market. We're going to have to absorb some of those units in order to have a balance. There is no balance today. The strongest part of that market, where I looked at yesterday and this morning, is between 300 and 399, which is something in the resale market of something that's 20 years old in the gallery or maybe the med center or something of that nature. You're still selling those units because they're probably doctors, maybe even buying a second home to be close, and they still keep their primary residence in Kingwood or something of that nature. But I have to be honest, I believe it's a little saturated. I believe the first choice of people today is to purchase a single family house with some little yard that has a little more healthier connotation than living at One Park Place. One Park Place is amazing because and I'm just using this example, there's nothing about the unit that sells One Park Place. What sells One Park Place is the access to the Phoenicia, the access to 10 restaurants within walking distance, the proximity to the hike and bike trail so I can pop right on and get to Buffalo Bayou Park safely with a dedicated bike lane that has the little armadillo things on it, or my proximity across from Discovery Green that has fewer people in it today than it would have before the virus hit. That's lovely. But is that enough in order to make up the others? The people that don't have those sort of amenities are probably going to struggle. I see those units, I see people cashing out of their houses, going to those units to rent, seeing if they really like them, and then deciding if they want to buy them or not. Or like my person who I'm selling one next week, could have rented, but the cost of buying was the same as renting, and she felt in the long run, I'm not talking about 1 year, in the long run, she felt like she was getting a bargain. If you can buy something for $975 today that sold for $1,350,000 5 years ago, if you do a little work, paint it, fix the marble, shiny it all up, spend 50 or 100, can you sell it for $1,350,000 in 3 years? And basically that was better than paying $7,500 a month rent for 2 years. So she's in financial investments. She ran the numbers and decided that investment was worth it for her. And many other people are just going to rent them, see if they like them, and go. But so, what else you got, Aaron?
Christina with Stewart Title wants us to know lenders must still verify that the buyer has a job, so they call the employer and see if they're still employed at the same income currently.
There are many. It's not the title company that does that, so it's the lender. So you can't blame Stewart Title for any of that. It is the lender really that may want to do that. I think lenders are risk averse, and it depends on that scenario. There had been some reduction in those rules just as a result that it's harder to get somebody when HR isn't working. I doubt HR is working for the city of Houston or county, or if they are, they're working from home. But I have seen and heard about in the last week or so, as the lending market has become less stable, that they're wanting some verification. The federal guidelines for that were relaxed. The government themselves reduced those rules so that they were not a requirement. So probably if the loans are federally backed under, loan amount less than $510,000, it's probably less of a deal. If the loan amount is non-conforming and it's a private lender, I'm sure as hell believe that they are nervous, and they probably have a greater concern and are wanting to ensure. It used to be very common to do something like that. When the economy is booming, it became less of a requirement, although not unheard of. And it's a factor back to where we talked about risk aversion. For some lenders, they're going to only want to lend to the very easiest, best clients that have the best chance of paying back the loans. And so until more of those non-conforming loans are backed by the federal government, which at some point they're probably going to get the chance to do again in order to provide some stability. You've got to imagine the East and West Coast, even though their conforming loan limits are in 780 or 750 or some number significantly higher than ours by a couple $100,000, there's still not a lot of things in Brooklyn or Manhattan that you can buy even for $1 million. And so they're going to find some way to stabilize some of those markets the best way that they can. But in the short run, you're probably going to find some of that, and some of that's going to be very frustrating. If you are a borrower and you work for a larger corporation, stay in contact with HR. Find out how you're going to have to help these lenders find a way to get what it is that they need. And just because they're not asking for it today, they very well could ask for it next week. It is a constantly evolving situation.
Bill, can I chime in real quick on that?
Absolutely. You're the expert.
The two main lenders that I use, one of them, it used to be 5 days prior you have to do a VOE. That hasn't changed in the 19 years I've been doing this. Now it's the day before with one of them. And then the other one, see, we have a warehouse line. We actually fund it. First Imperial Mortgage funds the loan up front, and then it gets purchased from the lender about 5 days after we close. Y'all don't see this, but after we close and fund, they're actually will not purchase that loan from my warehouse line without doing a VOE. So they could have had a job on the day of closing, lost a job the day after closing, and they won't purchase our loan. It's a buyback. So we get stuck with that. We haven't had that yet, but we were making it very clear to people and asking them 10 times, how stable is your job? Will you have a job 5 days after closing? And, it hasn't been an issue yet, but it could be.
Very well.
That's what's going on. And I'm not talking the non-conform. I'm talking conforming, vanilla, 20% down, 300 loan amount with 780 FICO. So it doesn't matter what type of loan. Okay. So just be leery of that. And like you said, it's not the title company, it's the lender that is implementing that.
Aaron, any other questions today?
Yeah.
Yep.
Facebook, will construction costs go down for remodels, and will historic restrictions be clawed back?
Historically, the answer to that's yes. So I'm building a house. I'm building a modern house. My architect, Michael Sue from Austin, they're thoroughly convinced that the cost of my house has gone down through this scenario because there won't be as much demand for the products that I was looking for. Now I'm building what is not a standard, craftsman white bungalow over there. So it goes back to the supply and the demand. So most people, immediate impression was the cost of many goods will go down. So I've been looking at the cost of restaurants. The reality of it is restaurants make up price because of volume. When they don't have volume, the cost of the meal actually increases significantly. So for me to go and get a chicken dinner from B&B Butchers, that chicken dinner's $26 on their menu today. And it's because they have to spread the cost of the chicken over 100 dishes versus 1,000 dishes. So the cost of that meal sheerly did increase because of supply and demand there. Construction is the exact same way. When we lost a fair amount of jobs and there weren't as many people and there was plenty of toilets and refrigerators and ranges, the price was cheaper. When the economy picked back up, think about Restoration Hardware. This is exactly how I think about it. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I walked into Restoration Hardware and I bought whatever I wanted. I could buy a gallon of paint and I could buy a light fixture. Today, Restoration Hardware doesn't own anything. They ship it from some third party the minute that I order it off of an iPad or whatever, because they don't want to get caught with the inventory. Plumbing fixtures are the exact same way. I used to go to Morrison Supply and buy the Devonshire Kohler toilet, and I could pick it up that afternoon. Now they don't stock shit. They want me to order it, pay 50% up front, and they'll ship it from Kohler, Wisconsin to me, and the price of those things all went up. They didn't go down because they didn't have excess inventory. Construction is about the same way. There'll be a slowdown in construction, which means the painter will be a little more affordable. They'll be a little more affordable on the insulation, a little more affordable on the sheetrock, a little more affordable on those sort of things. So I do believe construction and remodeling cost will go down. I think that those of us that are in that industry, if you're a remodeler or something, there's going to be less jobs than there were during a booming economy. And so you're willing to take a job for less than you would have taken one before. So truly, for the next year, I see the cost of those things declining. I do. I will find them more affordable than they were in a booming economy when supply and demand was such that, you were outbidding each other for some sheetrock.
Gotcha. Star has asked, how will this all affect revitalization of neighborhoods like the East End around Memorial Park?
Great question. Let's separate East End and Memorial Park because they're totally, you're talking about totally different things. Let's start back with Memorial Park, which has been a desirable location, for a number of years. The money that's earmarked for Memorial Park and the actual amount of money for infrastructure will increase the desirability of all of those areas. None of that money is borrowed. None of that money is not already earmarked. It's already there. In reality, they're actually able to speed up some of those projects. Same with some of the road and bridge projects and the drainage projects and the projects tied to flooding. All of those things will increase and not decrease, which will increase the desirability. And the same thing, if we get cooped up and work from home more for whatever reason, because that may be a new norm, the access to parks, green space, hike and bike trails, a tree, a grass, people become more desirable. So I think there's hardly any scenario, like I say, you have a $6 million house on Crestwood that's built in 1991, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the normal scenario in the middle of the marketplace, whether that is a $1 million house on a normal lot or it's a townhouse. I think those areas become more and more desirable. I don't see any scenario that, I don't think downtown is going to lose 200,000 people. I think for every restaurant that goes out, I think there's going to be someone that'll go in and the rent will be cheaper and the labor might be cheaper. And so I have no doubt that, Washington Avenue, Memorial Park, Herman Park, the Museum District, Montrose, the Heights, all those sort of areas, I think in general do just fine. The East End, and I have a client that's been looking in the East End, and I think the presumptive buyer of the East End is buying in the East End because of the continued redevelopment of the East End. They're not buying it for today, they're buying it on the come, that it would continue to get better. And I think there has to be a concern that it does not speed up with the same pace that it had been speeding up in the last 3 years. So I have a client who is buying a house for, $400,000 in the East End. They're pregnant and decided to buy a $500,000 house in the Heights for the sheer reason they didn't believe that the neighborhood was going to turn quick enough before the kid was going to the first grade compared to the Heights that's already there. So I do think some of the more emerging neighborhoods will take longer to emerge, whether that's the near North Side, whether that's the East End. Some of those areas will not have the same. If you're an investor today, if you're a smart investor today, you'll buy whatever opportunity that you can buy. But if you're buying an East End, you will hold on to it. And if you want to return your money, you will still go buy in a better area. It is still easier to make money to invest in an area that is thriving in a bad time than it is to buy one that only thrives in a good time. So it's from just sheer investment. If I was going to go invest in real estate, I'd go invest in the nicer areas because it's just safer. It's a safer return. It's safer to get out of there. I mean, it's versus the others, which I'm not saying don't go there. They're longer term investments. And there's the Frank Lou's of the world will go buy things now that he's not having to compete with John insurance agent and Billy the lawyer who want to be investors. They ain't going to invest today. And Frank will go buy land and he will hold on to it for 10 years and he will develop it just fine and he will be fine. He has a long-term strategy and I am all for those long-term strategies. But if you just ask me, are those areas, the East End will face some pause. There will not be the same level of investment in those areas as they are. It's just safety. People will invest in IBM before they will in Zoom stock when times are tough. It's just the proven time and time and time again. People would rather just invest a little bit more in a nicer neighborhood than they invest in emerging neighborhoods because they think they're the next Heights, they're the next Montrose, they're the next whatever. And when there's uncertainty and economic pause, there's less investment in those areas. Initially, you just buy and hold, you look for opportunities. Like I say, would I invest in some rent houses in the East End today, thinking I can develop them in 5 years? Sure, perfect investment. But they will suffer more than some of these other areas.
Drew asked basically the same question about the North Side since it's so close.
It's the same answer. It's the same answer. I mean, I think I look back at, those houses that Mario bought, a brand new 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath for $350. I would buy those all day long. They don't exist today. Some of them are $380. Are they going to be $350 again in 4 or 5 months? They very well might be. People don't invest in emerging areas in times of uncertainty. They don't. They tend so, and I'm not saying in any of these scenarios that there was going to be a massive drop in the price. There will be less amount of demand, and it just truly depends on the supply. So those areas are going to be more negotiable. They need to be a long-term play. For some people, they will love that they're not in a bidding war anymore, and so they'll get to buy them cheaper than they would have in February, and they won't have to compete or miss out on the 10 that come up on the market. Sellers probably need to be a little more negotiable. There'll be you won't even, that mid-market, if you're buying that bungalow and investing in those houses to sell, whether that's the new $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 house in the emerging neighborhood, which is still one of the more expensive houses in that neighborhood, they're going to be tough. Any area that's pushing a boundary is going to be tough. And that's River Oaks at 10 million. That's Memorial at 6 million. That's Spring Branch at 2 million. That's the Heights at 3 million. Unless it's supply and demand. Look, if you look at over 1 million what's gotten under contract and sold in the Heights, The very first thing that got under contract was the $2 million house because it's on the double lot. Because how many things are on a double lot for sale today out of the 455 houses in the Heights? One. How many got under contract? One. It's supply and demand. Those people who are under contract on that house have looked at 50 of my listings on normal lots and wanted an oversized lot zoned to Travis Elementary where they had a yard and room for a pool. There's only so many of them, and they're not going to make any more of them, and I don't think they're going to get any cheaper. But I think that if you're, the normal neighborhood and you're the most expensive house in the neighborhood, unless you are unique, unless you have something that no one else has, it's a softer market.
Okay, Bradley asks, any issues we may see coming up with VA loans?
I mean, just everyone needs to remember, no, VA loans are lovely. We love VA loans. They don't like old houses. They like new houses. The VA appraisers and inspectors don't like old electric boxes, old roofs, peeling paint, earth to wood conducive conditions. I mean, they never have, and they don't today, and there's absolutely no scenario different today in the VA loan today than there was last month. They love brand new David Weekley homes. They love brand new 3-story townhouses. There is a VA loan limit. We had someone yesterday that said they were getting a $1.5 million house and financing 1.3, and I mean, the limit in Harris County to loan is $510,000. So I'm not sure how they were going to get that. There's a VA loan limit for some of these things. But overall, if you're buying a new or newly remodeled house, I see absolutely no issue with it whatsoever. I think, like most of these houses, and this has nothing to do with VA, I think every seller probably gets the chance to do a few more repairs or throw a little more money at repairs in an option period than they did prior to this economic situation. So the VA guys, going to look at the water heaters in the closet, and the breaker box isn't labeled. They require those things to be done. So you're going to get the chance to do them, or they don't get the loan. But probably the guy buying it today, not VA loan, is going to get the chance to ask for those things, and the seller probably gets to do those things just as much or something similar to them. Sellers need to be a little more negotiable. Don't not be willing to throw another $1,000 or $2,000 more than you would have, a month or two ago. It's kind of silly to think, I mean, we can look at 1503 Herkimer. I mean, it was 600,000. My people bid 611 on March 20th. The first buyers didn't buy for whatever reason. I don't really think it was inspections. I think it was the economy. My people were unwilling to pay $590 1 week later. We're crying they didn't get it for 611 and weren't willing to pay $590 in 7 days. The difference was 7 days. The whole world changed in those 7 days. And so if they think they can buy a similar house for $550, they have the ability to wait 3 months and see. I don't know if they will or not. We haven't found anything else. But I think some of those people are just now, they're function of timing. And a lot of what we're talking about is timing. But I find areas like the Heights extremely desirable. And I think you're going to continue to find plenty of people who will find them desirable, who want to walk to things that they never thought about walking before. And so that desirability, I think even just a little respite, the ability to have these home offices. I think more people are going to have home offices, are going to want to have room for a home office, and they're not necessarily going to want their office to be on the couch where the kids and the husband is. So, having a nook here or there, or some way to make a little home office more attractive is probably going to be a pretty cool feature for people. But the walkability, we've been seeing it. It's been a movement, and I think you're going to see more and more of it. That's one of the things that's more desirable. Not just that you can walk, but that you can feel a sense of community, because we are somewhat disconnected with social distancing. And I think we don't want to just be holed up in our house. We want the ability to see, look, everyone loves seeing these kids with their chalk out on these fences and on these sidewalks, and the creativity, and who can't get a smile and just a little bit of joy in your heart by seeing the use of that time and energy to send such positive messages or whatever. So whether that's in Cinco Ranch or whether that's, you know, in Montrose, I still think that's what people are kind of looking for, some sense of community.
Liz on Facebook says, do you think historic restrictions will be relaxed?
Nope. I have no indication that historic restrictions would be relaxed. They've never been relaxed in any other particular instance. So you know, it's not like I don't visit with Margaret Wallace Brown and commissioners on the Historic Commission. I don't see any reason that those historic restrictions would be relaxed as a result of anything to do going on in the economy or the situation. No.
All right. And then Gloria asks, what are your thoughts on new duplexes and triplexes?
All right. You know, I think you got to remember triplexes have a set of rules and regulations that duplexes don't. So you got to remember we have a habitability rule in the city limits. It doesn't apply to the ETJ. That, you know, so, you know, new or updated, those that have been inspected, all those sort of things. So just remember, there is a difference, and make sure that you understand and that your agent can explain the difference between the rules and requirements and inspections of units greater than 2 on one legal description. That includes triplexes, fourplexes, anything of that nature. I think that we've seen a greater demand for those sort of things. I think you're going to see an affordability problem also, because same thing, you're not pumping the same amount of money into affordable housing. Maybe some of these apartments are going to be more affordable than they were before, but I don't really have any indication that they will be. I think Camden, before they turned around and lowered the rent, would just convert them to condos or something and sell them off and reduce those units from the marketplace, which is what happened with the REITs in 2001 and 2003 and 2008 and 2012. So, I mean, I think these smaller living that is, it's going to be very desirable. I think there's plenty of people. I personally believe there are 60,000 people in the oil and gas industry that are going to go into a new industry. And I think they're going to not make their $80,000 a year job. And I think some are going to go back to University of St. Thomas, and some are going to go to HCC, and some are going to go to work in logistics for Amazon, or I think they're going to get a new career. I think some of those jobs are just gone. And so one way is to reduce the footprint of your lifestyle and living in something smaller, simpler, enjoying the hike and bike trail and the parks and the museums, and refocusing part of your life. I think all of us are probably going to get the chance to change careers a number of times. I mean, I was in the restaurant business 20 years ago. Now I'm a glorified waiter, but I mean, most people change careers. And this is going to be another one of those instances that people change careers. And when they do that, they tend to step back. It's perfectly good to go live in a duplex or a triplex, perfectly good for people. And you're seeing this across the country, and especially I've been a proponent of adding more accessory dwellings to our single family housing stock so people can afford to stay in their single family housing. We need the income. The older you get, you love the compatibility of having a college age kid or a young teacher or a young banker or MBA student or chef or any of these sort of things. So you get the income potential, but you also get someone that you can connect with, someone that can, if you're 65 or 70, can bring you milk and toilet paper and a wet wipe or whatever. So I think you're going to see more of those sort of things: garage apartments, duplexes, triplexes. I think they're a perfectly good way that you're going to see more of a sense of community, more little courtyard living. Same thing where you see them every day on Facebook, where you're having these, you know, happy hour things in the driveways and you're each 20 feet apart from your neighbor or whatever. But it's, people want to feel a sense of connectivity, and that's another way that they can get that. I think they're very good investments. And maybe that's where you go to the near north side and the east end and you invest in some of those sort of things where there's less deed restrictions at the moment. Those areas will get more and more and more desirable. I'm just saying, in the 1 year short term, they're going to have a more difficult time than they would have before this event.
That's all we have.
Okay, we'll do this again next Tuesday. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll send out the recording to people that are interested, and maybe I'll get my video a little better next time. So thank you very much for being on. Appreciate it very much. I think so. Yes. Why didn't you just ask online?